What lies beyond Asshai-by-the-shadow? How far to the east do the maps take us? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. On this channel we dive deep into the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, as well as The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher. Welcome. This is another collaboration with the wonderful History of Westeros. Please do check out their amazing podcast and YouTube channel. There's a link in the description. In another video, I looked at what was west of Westeros, but what is to the far east of the map? There's Asshai, but what's beyond that? The furthest east we ever see live through a POV character in A Song of Ice and Fire is Qarth, when Dany makes it through the Red Waste to spend most of A Clash of Kings there. It's made clear then that although we, and the maesters through whose work we get most of our understanding of the wider world of Ice and Fire, might view Qarth as far to the east, the people there have a very different view. In fact, Qarthines view it as the centre of the world. There is much more to the east to be explored. In particular, there is the Jade Sea, stretching east for many hundreds of miles. We hear that many ships travel what's called the Trader's Circle, because the prevailing winds make it ideal for merchants to travel in something of a loop through the area, first entering what's called the Straits of Qarth through the Jade Gates, sailing clockwise around the sea, eventually reaching the Cinnamon Straits on the far side of Great Morak, and back to the entrance to the Straits of Qarth. The furthest place east from the starting point within that circle is Asshai-by-the-shadow, and that is often spoken of as the easternmost point of the known world by the people of Westeros. So, what is beyond that? Well, we should probably start off by acknowledging that the HBO map of Essos is nearly identical to the book version, except in the Far East, where it differs greatly. In this video, we'll focus on the book version of the world. And we'll look at Asshai itself in another video, don't worry, that's a fascinating place. The peninsula around Asshai and much of the Shadowlands is covered in ghost grass, a supernatural pale weed that stands taller than a person on horseback. It glows in the dark, and some believe this is because the stalks contain the spirits of the damned. Basically, like much of what we will talk about that far east, ghost grass is a mystery, but it is a growing one. It seems to be spreading ever further, choking out all other life, albeit very slowly. Given how slowly it spreads, the implication is that it first appeared in the region countless eons ago. Animals cannot eat ghost grass, making the region around the city lifeless. The Dothraki believe ghost grass will one day cover the entire world. Ghost grass may have some ancient connection or similar origin to the shadow itself, for which Asshai-by-the-shadow is named. The shadow is a supernatural and seemingly permanent gloom of sorts covering the region, which leads to the name, the Shadowlands. George R. R. Martin loves littering his world with oblique references to his literary fantasy predecessors, but we don't know if this is such a nod to C.S. Lewis. In any event, the shadow and the ghost grass are the most significant things in the immediate vicinity of Asshai, and should already give you a feeling of darkness, death, and despair. Nothing grows, and life does not find it easy. Though a seaport, the enormous city of Asshai, and seriously it is huge, you could apparently fit King's Landing, Old Town, Qarth, and Volantis, all of them within it. Asshai sprawls across both sides of the River Ash. In any normal place, a settlement built alongside a river offers many benefits, the most important of which are fresh water and food. Perhaps in times more ancient than we could possibly measure, the River Ash did that. After all, the largest city in the world would require quite a lot of fresh water. But now the water is black in the daytime and glows a phosphorescent green at night. What a sight that must be. A glowing river flowing through landscapes filled with similarly glowing ghost grass. The water is, unsurprisingly, unsafe to drink, yet fish do live in it, though they are malformed and blind and just as unfit to eat. With so many things glowing and lifeless, you would be tempted to view the area as a sort of fantasy version of Chernobyl, but worse. Though people do live in the Shadowlands, so it cannot be entirely inhospitable to human life. We're told that only 1 building in 10 in Asshai is inhabited, but still, 10% of a massive city is still a lot of people. Outside of Asshai, the people of the Shadowlands are known as the Shadowmen, and they have a distinctive look. It is common for Shadowmen to cover their bodies in tattoos and to wear red lacquer masks, such as the one worn by Quaithe, who claims to be from the Shadowlands herself. Miri Mazdur is Lazarine, but said that she learned the spell she used on Drogo, which summoned shadows to dance inside her tent, from a blood mage from the Shadowlands. Miri says she paid dearly for the lesson. Melisandre of Asshai is a shadowbinder as well, while all the other red priests and priestesses we know of are not. What connects these people, of course, is magic. Perhaps you need some kind of magic to survive in such an inhospitable place. Strange gods are worshipped there, as evidenced by the terrible and misshapen plundered statues Dany sees at Vaest Dothrak. But let's return to the map and the River Ash. The peninsula where Asshai resides is the southwestern corner of the Shadowlands. North and northeast of the city are the Mountains of the Morn, where the Ash River originates, flowing through the Vale of Shadows. Following it upriver leads to canyons so narrow that the sun only penetrates their depths when directly overhead at noon. Eventually, one would theoretically reach the city of Stygai, called the City of the Night due to that lack of daylight. I say theoretically reach because it is a haunted corpse city that even shadowbinders fear to tread. Thus, as far as we know, no one ever really goes to the Vale of Shadows, let alone the city of Stygai. Stygai is likely a nod to the word Stygian, which means of the river Styx from Greek mythology, and generally means dark and gloomy. In this, George R. R. Martin was influenced by Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan the Barbarian, and the highly relevant short story Shadows in the Moonlight, which features the city of Stygia, which is Stygai with the A and the I reversed. George R. R. Martin described the tale as a formative experience in his development as a reader of fantasy. Maybe one day I'll read that on my audiobook channel. Have I mentioned that I also have an audiobook channel called The Well-Told Tale, where I read classic fantasy and science fiction stories like Conan, H.G. Wells and H.P. Lovecraft? There's a link around here somewhere for that. But this is not nearly the only homage that George R. R. Martin placed in Far Eastern Essos. We'll get onto even more in a moment. But we do need to mention the dragon link here, because Illyrio Mopatis claimed that the dragon eggs he gave Dany were from the Shadowlands. There's a very good chance he's lying to her here. I think they are actually the ones that Alyssa Farman stole from Dragonstone centuries earlier, but his story works because everyone knows that dragons are associated with the lands east of Asshai. Bran dreams of dragons beyond Asshai when in his coma, and Dany recalls learning that the first dragons came from the Shadowlands and the islands of the Jade Sea. The World of Ice and Fire tells us of tales from Asshai which claim that dragons originated directly within the Shadowlands, and were first tamed by a race so ancient their name has been forgotten. Dragons still supposedly live near Stygai, and demons as well. Perhaps the ruined city was built by those forgotten people who tamed dragons. They may be the same race that caused the Shadow to reside in the region as well, or the Ghost Grass, or both. In truth, we may also here be seeing some echoes of George R. R. Martin's original plan for Daenerys to travel to Asshai and presumably learn lots about dragons while she was there. That idea got abandoned. She never made it any further east than Karth, but we still have the legends and rumours of dragons, even if no one claims to have actually seen any that far east. Returning to the map, the Shadowlands and the Mountains of the Morn stretch northeast from Asshai. Only the southern portion of the Mountains of the Morn fall under the shadow, leaving the rest of the region sunlit, as one would expect. At which point, things get even more sketchy. There are many unnamed rivers and valleys and perhaps civilizations in this area, though surely the locals have names for them. It's just that the maesters, through whose eyes we learn of these things, don't know. Eventually, one reaches the Hidden Sea, which is surrounded on three sides by mountains, while the fourth side, east, is off the map that we have. There are two cities on the Hidden Sea. On the northwestern side is the evocatively named City of the Winged Men. The inhabitants are said to have invented wearable leather wings, which are probably more like hang gliders than true flight, but who knows, this is a fantasy world. Residing on the southeastern side of the Hidden Sea is the city of Carcosa, and this, though we know very little about it, is the easternmost city on the map. Carcosa itself, as a name, is a multifaceted Easter egg from our dear writer. The oldest reference we know of is to the story An Inhabitant of Carcosa by Ambrose Bierce, published in 1886. In that story, the narrator awakens from sickness in an unfamiliar and strange realm. Eventually, the man discerns that he is dead and walking amid the ruins of the ancient and famous city of Carcosa. The city of Carcosa was subsequently borrowed by author Robert W. Chambers for his book of short stories The King in Yellow, published in 1895, only 9 years after An Inhabitant of Carcosa. Many of the stories contained within that are of the horror genre, while the title story is actually a play which refers to Carcosa. It is referred to as a place stranger than a night where black stars rise, where the shadows lengthen in lost, dim Carcosa. Beautiful writing, and deliberately confusing and evocative in equal measure. Chambers also includes a reference to unmasking in a way that makes it likely he's referencing Edgar Allan Poe's The Mask of Red Death. George R. R. Martin named the disease that wiped out the 10th free city of Gogossos, the Red Death, and he may have used the red mask idea for the red masks of Quaithe and her fellow Shadowmen, another literary reference. Yet another is H.P. Lovecraft, who referenced many names from it in his story The Whisperer in Darkness, published in 1931. The King in Yellow became part of the Cthulhu mythos from then on. Lovecraft specifically loved how The King in Yellow used vague references to the supernatural, which left the reader to their imagination to conjure up the worst possible truth. George R. R. Martin has clearly employed this technique in his map and world-building as well, not to mention within his stories. As I said, this part of the map of Essos contains a lot of homages, which perhaps tells us that George R. R. Martin is happy for this part of his world to be both evocative and mysterious. George R. R. Martin's version of Carcosa makes the city a bit more tangible, though no less magical. It is said that the 69th Yellow Emperor of UT, instead of a Yellow King, lives there in exile. It is said that he is a sorcerer lord and perhaps plotting his return, or revenge, or both. UT is known for its decadence. Perhaps George R. R. Martin's Carcosa is as well. Now let's look in another direction, to the south and east of Asshai, which lies outside the touch of the shadow. Directly east of the Asshai Peninsula is the Saffron Straits. Saffron has for centuries, if not longer, held the title of the world's costliest spice on planet Earth, and has been traded since at least the 7th century BC. Hundreds of years ago, it was said to be worth more than a gold-filled bag of equivalent size. Even in 2025, it costs upwards of $5,000 per kilogram. It is thus a very telling name choice by George R. R. Martin, and implies not just a trade route, but a rich one, if more than a bit risky, given what we've already noted about the area. Following the Saffron Straits eastward leads to the Isle of Ulos, the easternmost island of the map that we have, including all of the 1,000 islands north of Essos. There is a ruined city there, seemingly positioned to control the narrow portion of the Saffron Straits that lie between the Shadowlands and the island. Perhaps this city was once an ancient rival of Asshai, or a colony of theirs meant to guard their interests in the trade routes, but like much in this part of the world, it is now abandoned and dead. Beyond that, well, we don't know. If there is or was a trade route, that implies there must be trading centres, if not cities. Some maybe even older than Asshai or newer than King's Landing. Personally, I tend to think that whatever is further down the Saffron Straits, it probably was once quite rich, being presumably where saffron came from, but now it is not so much. I suspect if there were a huge civilization or prosperous trading centre, we would have heard of it, if only in passing, or ships traversing the Trader's Circle up to Asshai would have carried on, or at least bought up some goods from there at Asshai. So probably there was once a rich city or empire there, but like everything else in this area, it has succumbed to the shadow, or the ghost grass, or the dragons, or demons, or whatever other horror lies even further east. Our final bit of knowledge of the Far East is the other side of the Saffron Straits, and the continent of Ulthos. I say continent, but it's very possible that Ulthos connects to Essos on the further east beyond the Saffron Straits, or to Sothorios further south. George R. R. Martin has said this ambiguity is intentional. These are Westerosi maps, and they represent the information the Maesters have, which is very limited when it comes to this part of the world. As a result, there is nothing on Ulthos on the map, apart from what we're told is jungle. It shares a similar latitude to the continent of Sothorios, which is filled with steaming jungles which have never known the sound of axe or saw. But a closer look at the authorised map in the Lands of Ice and Fire reveals that the green of Sothorios is a different shade from the green of Ulthos, indicating different flora, which in turn would mean different fauna. That's probably a good thing, given that Sothorios is a hellscape of sorts. It's a place where the animals are deadly and the diseases are far worse. Yet it is also said to be a place of riches, so people keep giving it a go despite the overwhelming danger. We don't know, but given its proximity to Asshai and the implied wealthy trade routes, it would be strange if there weren't at least some attempts to settle Ulthos, perhaps when the shadow first appeared or the ghost grass expanded ever further. It's easy to imagine many people relocating to a place not as cursed, and Ulthos is so close by. Intriguingly, Ulthos also breaks the continent naming pattern, where cardinal directions are used: south for Sothorios, east for Essos, west for Westeros. Some have theorised that Ulthos is a reference to Ultima Thule, which was a generic term used on maps of old to denote unknown or barely known lands on the edges of their knowledge. Ultima is Latin for furthest. It certainly fits. This is part of the implied entertainment that comes from these lesser-known places. Our imaginations can run wild with theories and ideas about Stygai, Ulthos and the Shadowlands, Carcosa and the rest. This is how George R. R. Martin intended it. Which isn't to say that we'll never know what is there. This world is constantly expanding. There was a time in this fandom where we didn't even have a complete map of Westeros, let alone Essos and beyond, so why not east of Asshai? And of course, we have one tantalising hint that we do already know what is east of Asshai, or one named character in this world knows at least. Alyssa Farman sailed west of Westeros and never returned. But we do get this intriguing reference in a description of Corlys Velarion's travels. We know he went as far as Asshai, but seemingly no further east. On his second voyage, Sir Corlys sailed even further east, and became the first Westerosi ever to reach Asshai-by-the-shadow, the bleak black city of the Shadowbinders at the edge of the world. There he lost his love and half his crew, if the tales be true. And there as well, in Asshai's harbour, he glimpsed an old and much weathered ship that he would swear forevermore could only have been the Sun Chaser. That's Alyssa Farman's ship. So what lies east of Asshai? If you survive past the Shadow and the Ghost Grass, past the Corpse City and the City of Winged Men, on through the Saffron Strait or around Ulthos and east, across a seemingly endless sea filled with krakens and sea dragons, if you somehow make it all through that, you will find that what ultimately lies east of Asshai is the west coast of Westeros. If you'd like to see more A Song of Ice and Fire videos like this, there's a link to my playlist on the left of your screen now. Or to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.